Hello, world historians. We're sailing to Byzantium this afternoon, and this is an illustration of the kind of architecture which flourished under this Byzantine civilization. And many of you are no doubt wondering, you've come across Byzantium in the textbook, but why is Byzantium really worth our time to study and consider? This seems to be almost a sort of side route of world history, a kind of footnote to the Roman Empire. But I want to suggest that it was a little bit more than just a footnote. If you think about the Roman Empire itself, the Western Roman Empire, what we think of as the empire founded on the city of Rome, fell in 476 of the Common Era. Now, this is an accepted date. This was the date in which the last of the Latin-speaking Roman emperors was deposed by a so-called German barbarian warrior. But at the same time, the Byzantine Empire, which was never referred to by its inhabitants as Byzantium, but was referred to rather confusingly as Rome, Eastern Rome, it survived for another 1,000 years. In fact, it wasn't until, almost 1,000 years, it wasn't until 1453 that the Roman Empire in the east, the Byzantine Roman Empire, actually fell to the advance of the Turkish armies who were moving into that region. So when we compare Byzantium and Rome, we have to remember that the Byzantines genuinely believed that they were continuing the legacy of the Roman Empire, which had split into two halves, essentially two separate administrative units in the early 4th century of the Common Era. This is also the time when Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, becomes the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity, having moved his capital from the city of Rome, which remains the capital of the Western Roman Empire, to the city of Constantinople, as he calls it, which becomes the old city of Byzantine, the Byzantine Empire. So there's a bit of confusion here with the terminology, but we have to remember that the Romans, while they spoke Latin, the Byzantines were very much of a Greek civilization, and in many ways there's a sort of coming round of the circle of the kind of Mediterranean crucible of civilization that you see the Greeks returning to the driving seat. Rome, of course, was a pagan civilization, and when Constantine converts to Christianity, I think it's significant that he moves his personal capital to the city of Byzantium, which he then renames after himself, Constantinople, and this becomes a Christian culture. And then finally, of course, you have the republican origins of the Western Empire in Rome, which was still reflected in the constitution, and that was sort of overwhelmed by the advent of the empire. But in the East, the Byzantine society was really looking forward more towards the absolute monarchy of medieval Europe. So they sort of rather did away with the old legacy, if you like, of Republican Rome. So there are a couple of other reasons, I think, why Byzantium matters, why it's worth studying. One of which is, again, it served as a kind of repository, a safe house for much of the wealth that had been accumulated by the Roman Empire, but also creating wealth in its own right in terms of being at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, the region of Anatolia, which we would now refer to as modern-day Turkey, was actually quite wealthy in terms of its agriculture, its commerce, its command of both the Silk Road and the Mediterranean sea routes. So it was really strategically very important and played a key role in developing that region of the world economically. The other thing that I've already mentioned is the fact that this was an empire which lasted, with some crises I should admit, but lasted in one form or another for over nearly 1,000 years, which is even longer, in fact, than the Roman Empire proper, or what we think of as the Roman Empire housed in Rome. And during this period, the Byzantines were able to extend their grasp or their influence through both religious and diplomatic missions, and also to extend their form of Christianity. Of course, before the Protestant Reformation of the 16th century, there were really only two officially recognized streams of European Christianity, the Roman Catholic version, and the Eastern or Orthodox Church, which you see, of course, in today in parts of Eastern Europe, but most notably in Greece and in Russia. And the influence of Byzantium in European culture was quite diverse. It was quite profound. So, for example, ideas which we might think of now as sort of relics of pre-enlightened times, but which were very important to understand feudal medieval society, things such as the doctrine of divine right, which is shown in this particular image here. This is the idea that monarchs were chosen by God, and therefore they were above, if you like, the realm of normal mortal politics. And here you have this Byzantine emperor who had the rather wonderful name of Basil the Bulgar Slayer, because he was noted for his brutality to the Bulgarian population of the empire, and he's being crowned by essentially by Jesus in this illustration, and being anointed by the archangels. And you can see the images of his predecessors and his subjects groveling before him in the ground. And this really sort of says a very powerful statement about the role of kingship in medieval society. This is an innovation for the Byzantines. This is not an inheritance of the Roman tradition. The Byzantines were also important for transmitting both Greek and, it should also be said, Islamic learning to medieval Europe. So that by the time that Byzantium actually fell to the Turkish invading armies in 1453, you see a certain wave of Byzantine scholars leaving Greece, going out into the Mediterranean. Many of them end up in Italy, where they act as one of the many triggers of the European Renaissance. So they're important culturally as well as politically. And this can be measured through the production of their art. Their culture was very aesthetic. In other words, it valued art as a means to enhance the religious content of their culture and their worship. Of course, our image of Jesus Christ, probably the most immediately recognized image of any historical figure. We see him here in this Byzantine mosaic. Of course, the mosaic was an art form that was inherited from the Romans, but the image of Christ was very much Byzantine. It was very much Greek, and some scholars have suggested going back to pre-Christian times, mirroring the image of Zeus, this bearded Greek deity. And it's, of course, worth pointing out that in a pre-literate society, which most of the world was, before the advent of modern print culture, it was important to have a visual language which could be recognized by people of any level of education throughout the Christian world. And it was important, therefore, to have images such as this one of Christ that could be recognized, that needed no kind of textual explanation. Another image that we see through this Byzantine tradition of iconic art. Of course, we talk about icons as being these little symbols we click on our computer screen, but iconography goes back to the Greek tradition of depicting figures like the Virgin Mary, and we take this for granted because we see these kind of images so much, not just in Byzantium but also in the Catholic Church and in religious art generally, that we forget that this was a conscious attempt to create this kind of visual language, which had a key impact in spreading Christianity throughout Europe. And here's another example by actually a Russian artist, a Russian iconographer by the name of Andrei Rublev, illustrating the transfer of that tradition into parts of Eastern Europe. So this is the Byzantine Empire. Its culture goes back, of course, as well to the downfall of the parent, if you like, the Western Roman Empire. One of the other key developments of the Byzantine religious economy was they were the first people outside of China to develop the secrets of silk making, and that had a huge impact in terms of their exporting of these luxury brocades and other church vestments and altar covers and so on. But one of the things that we associate with the fall of The Roman Empire, of course, is this wave of barbarian invasions from the east, which begins with the Huns, but the Huns coming from Central Asia are actually driving in front of them other barbarian tribes, as they would have been described by both the Byzantines and the Romans, including the Goths, the Vandals, and others. And this can be thought of not just as an invasion in a strict military sense, but this is a very deep-rooted migration of kind of barbarian migration coming from the east and basically compressing the Western Roman Empire. And as we've read in the textbook, Rome by the 5th century had a great deal of internal problems. But one thing that we also need to remember is the impact of this huge human migration and the fact that this is actually connected to global developments. This is not just the politics of Rome, but one of the reasons that the Huns, who were actually an Asian people, nomadic people, moved into Europe was because it was easier for them to move into the collapsing vacuum of the Roman Empire than the Chinese Empire at that time, which was in a strong position, which was consolidating its power. So you see over a period not just of decades, but of centuries, this movement of people from the east to the west, and their absorption and eventually their destruction of the Roman Empire. So when we think about the fall of the Roman Empire, of course, we have this perhaps stereotypical image of these barbarians looting and raping and pillaging their way through the great imperial streets of Rome. Now this, of course, is a much later, rather romanticized illustration of this moment. But we have to remember that by the end of the Roman Empire in the West, most of the good stuff had already either been stolen or possibly transferred to Byzantium. And we're talking here about both material wealth, but also religious relics, such as the remnants of the cross on which Jesus allegedly was crucified, or at least this was allegedly, venerated as being the original cross. So all these kind of objects are taken from the West and transferred to the East, or are absorbed into the pillaging waves of Alaric in 410 AD, and Attila and the Huns, the Visigoths, the Vandals, these successive waves of barbarian invaders. And eventually the last Roman emperor is deposed in 476 of the Common Era by a German military warlord by the name of Odoacer. Now it's a query whether or not we can say that Rome actually falls at this point. To what extent was there anything left indeed to fall? And this is reflected, I think, in the name that was given to the last emperor, who was only a child, essentially a youth of about 15 years of age, Romulus Augustulus. Now, this is a kind of nickname that was given to the last emperor of Rome, but Romulus Augustulus means little Romulus and little Augustulus. Augustulus is a kind of diminutive of Augustus, the founder of the Roman Empire, and Romulus, again, it's kind of like mini me. Romulus was originally the founder of the city of Rome, but by this stage he's being his descendant, the Emperor Romulus Augustulus, is being diminished as this hapless child. So by the time that the Germans basically take over the reins of power in the West, there's really very little for the Romans to defend, and all the power, all the wealth and prestige has moved east to Byzantium, where it will remain for hundreds of years to come. Okay, so we'll come back and look at the Dark Ages in just a second. Thanks very much.